Murray's life originally proceeded in very peaceful steps. However, on his way to work, he was targeted by a group of criminals lurking in the shadows. His colleague Barry was also targeted. The two of them worked together at the Northern Bank headquarters in Belfast. One is the bank manager, the other is the vault manager. Yet, the relationship between the two is like oil and water. Murray feels very angry seeing Barry swaying a bunch of vault keys while walking in the lobby. It is precisely because of such a careless work attitude that he has remained just a minor vault manager for so many years. Barry does not feel there is anything wrong with this job, nor does he want to humble himself to flatter others. Murray exchanged his self-respect for promotions and salary increases. Christmas is coming, and Barry dresses up as Santa Claus to distribute gifts to everyone. But Murray is too lazy to even pay attention, so Barry conveniently throws his gift away. An attitude of take it if you need it, leave it if you don't. Facing an employee's request for a shift change, Murray announced on the spot that he would let Barry handle the shift. The fact that their relationship is so bad is well understood by all staff. But to others, Murray is undoubtedly an extremely excellent manager. Mags, the head of security, whose family situation is always difficult, unsurprisingly drew a supermarket voucher. This was clearly a result arranged by Murray. However, with a personality that does not tolerate falsehood, Mags has absolutely no desire to accept this favor. Everyone takes Murray's dedication to the bank for granted, but rarely does anyone care about his feelings. Besides worrying about the work of his subordinates, Murray also bears an enormous pressure. His superiors required him to finalize a layoff list by Monday, initiating suspension procedures for half of the bank's staff. What makes Murray's headache even more is that his wife, Celine, wants to sleep separately. Just when he thought life could not get any worse than this, no one knew that behind the rock bottom he imagined, there still lurked a more fatal abyss. After work, Barry often organizes a fan club at a bar. Places that ordinary people find suffocating and foul make him feel like a fish in water. That day, a strange guest broke the rule and invited the whole club to drink to their heart's content. Because Barry drank too much, he was completely unaware that they had come for him. He got dead drunk on the spot, completely failing to see the gun tucked into the other man's belt. The man named Dink did not hesitate to ask him if he worked at the bank and still kept the vault keys. Barry had no intention of hiding it, using the alcohol to confess everything, and a giant web woven to target them officially began to tighten from there. On the night of December 19, 2004, two police officers suddenly knocked on Murray's door. He and his wife were kidnapped on the spot. Murray, who was shouting loudly, was also knocked unconscious with a gun butt. Barry, who was watching football at home, was also unfortunate enough not to escape. Even his elderly mother living with him was kidnapped as well. The leader was not at all interested in the vault keys, because what he really needed was Barry himself. Celine was forced to wear a jumpsuit. Flustered and not knowing what to do, she asked the other party not to use duct tape, but to switch to a hood instead. Amidst the screaming, Murray's and Barry's blindfolds were removed at the same time. Seeing each other, both were extremely shocked, completely unaware of why they had encountered such a great disaster. Dink sat opposite with a calm face. The two of them knew every bit of information about their captives by heart. The current situation was simple. If Murray did not cooperate, Barry's mother would be executed. If Barry did not obey, the one to die would be Celine. Hearing these words, the two were terrified. However, Dink gave them absolutely no chance to negotiate, only ordering them to follow the plan. At some point tomorrow, a white truck will park in the vault's loading area. It will be disguised as a garbage truck specialized in handling office waste before Christmas. By then, no matter what method they use, the two must fill 3 cages with cash and bring them onto the garbage truck. As for Dink's people, they will not step a single foot into the bank during the entire process. This will be a brilliant robbery plan because only bank insiders know its true loopholes. The two hurried away, staying awake all night, carefully calculating everything that was about to happen. At 11:43 am on Monday, December 20, 2004, Murray drove to Wellington Street, where the bank is located, dropping Barry off first. Regardless of what grievances the two had in the past, for the sake of their families, today they were forced to cooperate well. Murray entered the office as usual, but his demeanor and tone were extremely tense. Mags and the gatekeeper Jim both noticed the bruise on his forehead. Murray only explained it as accidentally hitting a cabinet. He followed the set plan, announcing in advance that a garbage truck would arrive later to collect trash. Barry, standing nearby and hearing the entire conversation, was breaking out in a cold sweat. Fortunately, Murray, as the manager, did not need to be too hesitant when speaking or working. As soon as he reached the office, he took out a screwdriver, ignored everyone, and rushed down to the basement. Although the cleaning staff was puzzled by the manager's abnormality, they still pointed out the location of Barry's locker. Unexpectedly, Murray used force to pry open the locker and rummaged through it. Barry's notebook was kicked away on the spot, leaving only the cleaning staff standing there bewildered. Barry, in the restroom, was completely unaware of this. He only wanted to use cold water to calm himself down, but even if he punched his hands raw, it was hard to suppress the tension from the bottom of his heart. Murray returned, but before he could even warm his seat, he was called to a meeting by his assistant. Only at this moment did he remember that today was the day to report the layoff list. At 15:21 p.m., Murray prepared in a hurry, stepping into the meeting room restlessly. But just as he was about to submit the list, he was interrupted by a sudden phone call. Normally, Murray would absolutely never make this mistake. Ironically, that phone was left by Dink. With a confused mind, he could only interrupt the meeting and rush into the restroom to receive instructions. Fortunately, the garbage truck had not arrived yet, and this was only a test call. Time passed minute by minute. Murray and Barry worked as usual, but pretended to be busy. They still hadn't thought of a way to get past the security department. The kidnappers were not at all worried about this issue, as long as they maintained good control over both families. And while their plan progressed slowly, the hostages were also finding ways to save themselves. The elderly woman in her 60s took the opportunity when the kidnappers left to knock over her sewing box. She struggled to reach a pair of scissors to cut her bonds, originally intending to call the police but fearing that turning on the speakerphone would make too much noise. Seeing the mailman about to arrive, the old woman hurriedly wrote a note for help. But just as she stealthily pushed it out the door, the kidnapper stepped on her wrist. At 17:23 p.m., Barry learned of the situation. He was extremely worried and hurriedly begged the other party not to harm the old lady. But the angry kidnapper forced him to bring out £1 million before 1825 and specifically stipulated the denomination must be £20 notes. Unable to refuse, Barry could only take action immediately. It was only then that he discovered his locker had been pried open. But when the cleaning staff reported it was Murray's doing and expressed willingness to be a witness to report it to HR, Barry firmly refused. Learning this news, Murray was very surprised, thinking only that the kidnappers were making trouble without cause. Barry also did not clarify that this stemmed from his mother's resistance. After all, he still did not want to trust Murray. Only Murray knew how much pressure he was enduring. First, he contacted Mags by phone, explaining that he himself did not know the details of the contracted waste disposal company. Mags originally intended to ask for the other party's phone number to confirm personally, but was abruptly hung up on by Murray. This manager did not know how much longer he could stall for time, only knowing he would stall for as long as possible. The two pretended to clear trash, going one after the other to the vault, using their keys to jointly open the heavy iron door. They intentionally or unintentionally used the iron cages to obstruct the surveillance camera's view, taking that opportunity to stuff in the required amount of cash. The more Murray thought, the more he felt something was wrong, always feeling he had fallen into Barry's trap. After all, he had never seen the other's mother being kidnapped. Until he took advantage of Barry's inattention to pin him down, snatched his phone, and saw 3 missed calls. Only then did he learn about the storm happening at Barry's house. Barry finally spoke the words he had held in his heart for so long. Maybe you hate me, because back then my father fired you from the bank, but I will not push my mother to her death because of that. At least right now, we are in the same boat. Through the surveillance camera, Mags saw Murray suddenly fall and hurriedly rushed to the vault to check. But when he arrived at the scene, the two had already reconciled, only explaining that Murray had accidentally tripped. When Mags asked about the injury on Barry's hand, it was also explained as being caused by rubbing against the iron cage. Mags relaxed his vigilance and finally left. Just then, the kidnappers called to confirm progress. Since the basement had no signal, Barry had to scramble up to the upstairs restroom to answer. But in his panic, he was completely unaware that the scene of him stepping out of the women's restroom was seen entirely by Mags. Celine, tied up on the second floor, was extremely anxious. Compared to her own safety, she was more afraid that Murray would be caught red-handed. The female kidnapper did not care at all about her crying. After all, how could these upper-class people who only knew how to enjoy themselves understand the bitterness she had endured? As for Murray at the bank, he also encountered a new trouble. His superiors didn't even bother to consult him anymore, directly issuing the layoff list, and Mag's name sat prominently on it. It was just that the current situation did not allow him to worry about this. After finishing the check-up call, Barry quickly counted enough cash, but there was no relief in his heart. After all, bringing this money out under the close supervision of the security department was harder than reaching the sky. Only Murray remained calm, promising he would think of a suitable way. At 17:47 p.m., Barry left the vault first. At the same time, Murray also directed his assistant to inform everyone they could leave work early today, as an extra reward for Christmas. The assistant specifically reminded him that he should quickly announce the layoff list. However, with the holiday season approaching, how could Murray know how to announce this bolt from the blue? Even worse, he had accidentally lost that layoff list. The bank employees were completely unaware of the impending event here, their hearts only filled with the joy of going home early. Barry broke into a cold sweat, gritted his teeth, and stepped out to the entrance, obediently waiting for Jim's usual check. He could only pretend his jacket zipper was stuck to stall for time, hoping Jim would be lenient. In despair, a crowd of bank employees suddenly rushed out the door. Urged by everyone, Jim had to open the door to let them through, creating a golden opportunity for Barry to fish in troubled waters and sneak out. By the time Jim realized, Barry had already taken £1 million in cash and run to the exchange location. Noticing the abnormality, Mags went directly to find Murray to question him. However, letting people off early on Christmas Eve was also understandable. More than that, Mags was interested in the layoff list in Murray's hand. In reality, Mags, who was supporting a struggling family, was the one who cared most about the layoff results. How could Murray not understand Mags' anxiety? The reason he hesitated and refused to announce the results was also because he wanted to find a way to hold on to a bit more hope for his subordinates. It's just that as a manager, there are things he says that even a single word will lead to unpredictable consequences, let alone being in such a dire situation. At 18:18 p.m., Barry arrived at the meeting point as agreed. A friend from the club originally intended to tease him by pretending to mug him, but noticed Barry's bag was unusually heavy. However, he simply thought there were bricks inside the bag and never suspected it was stacks of cash. Barry returned with a relieved face, silently thanking heaven and earth that the transaction had gone smoothly. But right at that moment, both men received a photo showing their loved ones with guns pointed at their heads. Dink immediately called and ordered them to prepare the entire remaining amount of cash immediately. Murray immediately contacted Mags to report that the garbage truck was arriving. This time he also took the initiative to hang up first, not giving Mags a chance to ask for more details. Little did he know, Mags had already sent Jim to investigate the situation. The two, busy stuffing stacks of money into the iron cage, completely failed to notice Jim's appearance. Murray was scared out of his wits, only knowing to grab a stool to shield the view. Unexpectedly, Jim, with a nature of craving cheap gains, happened to want to take that stool home to use. Seeing this, Barry panicked and grabbed a wrench, intending to risk a life and death struggle. Fortunately, Murray stopped him in time, using a stern tone to bark that this was bank property. Jim, feeling humiliated, had to slink away, not even feeling that Murray's hurried action of forgetting to provide the truck information was suspicious. Just as Jim left, Dink called to report they were in position. The two hurriedly pushed the iron cage disguised as a trash bin toward the emergency exit, passing through numerous layers of security doors on the way without raising any suspicion from the guard team. However, because he was too tense, Barry did not notice the obstacle under his feet, making the iron cage tip over with a crash. Every sack of cash burst open and scattered across the floor, clearly exposed before the security cameras. By some stroke of luck, of the two security guards who should have been on duty in front of the screens, one had left to get documents, and the other was buried in a newspaper. By the time they returned their attention to the screens, the two who had just been scared out of their wits had quickly cleaned up the scene. At 18:59 p.m., the two carried a restless and anxious mood, only a door away from the outside world. But now they had no way back. Jim's eyes were still fixed on the stool, resentfully thinking that this manager Murray was too much. But even in his dreams, he could not imagine that inside those iron cages was such a huge amount of cash. The kidnappers looked tense, their eyes glinting as they watched the two loaders, always highly alert to every small movement. A group of drunken women staggered by, making the robbers startle, almost drawing their guns in defense. Fortunately, the group did not cause trouble, only laughing loudly and leaving. Murray's heart at this moment felt like it wanted to jump out of his chest. He hurriedly sent the last iron cage onto the truck. Unexpectedly, Barry was kept by them as a hostage just in case. Just as Murray leaned down to pick up a cigarette butt left by the robber, he was interrupted by Jim suddenly speaking. He had to perfunctorily explain that the environmental company would bring the cages back tomorrow and that Barry had asked to leave early. Returning to his office, Murray still could not calm down. He couldn't believe such a huge amount of money had been funneled out so easily. Suddenly remembering something, he opened Barry's notebook. Sure enough, what hit his eyes was a long series of small, value numbers. Sensing something fishy, Murray immediately picked up the phone intending to call the police when the phone rang from the kidnappers, suddenly cutting off that intention. On the other end, Barry's voice trembled as he announced the robbers would return within 20 minutes. These insatiably greedy robbers obviously still wanted to steal more. Murray had absolutely no courage to refuse, because no amount of money could be exchanged for his wife's life. He did not know that at this time, Celine had been escorted by the kidnappers deep into the jungle. Embracing extreme terror, she could only cry and beg the robbers to send her body back to her family. Unexpectedly, the robber retracted the gun pressed against her head and silently took off the shoes she was wearing. Because he was so worried about his wife's safety, Murray rushed straight down to the vault alone, frantically stuffing money into the iron cages. Mags, in the security room, was unaware of this suspicious action. All his attention had been focused on the layoff list that the laborer picked up and gave to him. Holding the dismissal decision in his hand, Mags was stunned and almost collapsed, immediately searching for Murray to settle the score. As for Murray, just as he was about to push 2 iron cages full of money out of the elevator, he caught sight of Mag's aggressive figure marching down the stairs. Murray fearfully pressed the door close button, taking the opportunity to hide in a corner. Overcoming Mag's hurdle, Murray panted as he pushed the 2 heavy iron cages all the way to the security door. And Jim was even so lazy that he didn't bother to walk downstairs, carelessly pressing the button to open the gate. Yet, at the very moment Murray was loading the goods onto the truck, he involuntarily faced Mags. The security chief slightly lowered his eyes, seeing at a glance the stacks of cash exposed through the gaps in the iron cage. However, he only threw Murray a deep look, then turned his back and walked straight into his office. Once the bank had heartlessly fired him, then why should he devotedly protect their assets anymore? On the side of the robbers, they didn't care about this unintended incident at all. At the same time, the appearance of a garbage collection truck in the evening aroused the suspicion of the local police officer in charge of the area. This person immediately called for patrol backup to check. Unfortunately, when they circled their car to Wellington Street, that garbage truck had already turned the corner and vanished. Before escaping, Dink left a message for the two, promising that in just 1 more hour everything would return to its proper orbit. Reality showed this man did not break his word. Celine trembled in the deep forest but still did not feel any bullet hit her. Escaping the encirclement, she staggered to find her car only to find it had been disabled, so she gritted her teeth and crawled barefoot toward the highway. She finally managed to wave down a passing car. The kind driver understood the situation and immediately reported it to the police. At Barry's house, the robber also used a knife to cut the bonds for the old woman. Before retreating, he carefully wiped away all fingerprints at the scene, not forgetting to threaten the old woman that she must wait exactly 1 hour before she was allowed to act. Back at the bank, all the cash in the vault now consisted only of a few small coins. But what the two cared about most at this moment was the safety of their families. This was also the final responsibility of men. Murray appeared extremely regretful for having suspected Barry. He had firmly believed the numbers in the notebook were a list for dividing the stolen money. Through Barry's explanation, he realized it was only a notebook for collecting club fees for the football fan club. Standing amidst the mess, the 2 men had calm faces, silently waiting for the final judgment of fate. In another development, Mags in the security control room was also immersed in a terrifying silence. When all the storms had passed, the 2 families were finally peacefully reunited. The event of the bank being boldly robbed created a violent shockwave in public opinion. The amount stolen rose to a huge figure of over £20 million. Without a doubt, this was the largest-scale robbery in history. Despite tireless investigative efforts, to this day, the police have still been unable to bring the true mastermind to light. Murray and Barry, the reluctant victims, luckily escaped all legal charges. After many rounds of tense negotiations between the government and the bank, the final decision was that all paper money currently circulating in the market would be recalled and completely invalidated. Instead, a completely new version of banknotes with different colors and designs would be issued. So if one only looks at the outcome of what this group of thieves stole, in the end, it was just a pile of worthless scrap paper. The entire story of the movie, The Extraordinary Heist, ends here. Thank you for accompanying us. See you in the latest video.